Are we ready?
We're ready.
All right, welcome to the February 11th, 2021 BAR small virtual meeting. My name is Lindsay Van Slambrook. The other board members present this afternoon are Glenn Gardner, Bill Moore Wilson, Julia Martin, and Bill Huey. City staff present are BARS Administrator Kim Lavin and Preservation Planner Linda Bennett. The order of the meeting today will be as follows. Each application will begin with an introduction and overview of the project by city staff to the board and for the benefit of the public. Then we'll hear from the applicant. We'll have an application presentation. There will be a 10-minute limit on this. Any questions of the applicant by the board or staff? Any presenters during this time, please state your first and last name clearly for the record. Any persons affiliated with the project, such as owners, developers, designers, consultants, should also speak during this period. By ordinance, the board can ask questions at any time, but by custom, we typically ask them on the heels of the applicant's presentation. From there, we'll move on to a period of public comment. We'll limit that to 10 minutes total for all comments. Again, please state your first and last name clearly for the record if you are speaking. After we hear from the public, we will move on to city staff comments and recommendations. On the heels of that, the applicant will have the opportunity to respond to any questions that the city has posed or to respond. We ask that during that time, the applicant responds specifically to the question that's asked. This is not an opportunity to reopen the presentation. After we have heard from any response from the applicant, we'll move on to board discussion and a vote. The following items have been withdrawn or deferred today. Agenda item number 2, 160 and a half Smith Street was withdrawn by the applicant. And agenda item number 5, 39 Meeting Street, for staff review. Please limit your comments to architecture only. Any comments related to zoning, parking, traffic, lot coverage, or examples, those are not within the purview of this board and we will not be able to address them. At this time, Kim has some virtual meeting protocol that she will go through.
Thank you. Yes, staff will control the PowerPoint presentation that includes everything submitted by the applicant by the deadline in accordance with the submittal requirements. Applicants simply need to ask staff to advance to the next slide during your presentation. Applicants, staff, and board members are required to give their name whenever speaking. Video and microphone has been disabled for all attendees. Attendees, not board or staff members, will only be given capability to speak when they're called on during the public comment period. Chat and Q&A functions have been disabled for everyone. The public comment, the applicants and all team members and the public have been required to register, indicate the project which they wish to comment on, and submit any documents in advance of the meeting. Just as in an in-person meeting, all applications heard today are part of the public meeting format. If you've registered and will speak during the public comment portion of the meeting, you'll need to state your name and address for the record. Those members of the public that have registered will be called in order by project. Members of the public that speak are encouraged to remain in the meeting for completion of the item they've commented on. And staff will call on the registered members of the public to speak for each project. Unregistered members of the public who raise their hand will not be called on. And for the board members will be polled by the chair for comments and for their vote on a motion. Each member, when voting, should respond yay in favor or nay not in favor. The chairman shall reread the motion verbatim, and the board member making the motion to correct the chairman if he or she has not reread the motion accurately. If a board member needs to recuse, he or she will be temporarily removed from the meeting and placed back in the meeting at the start of the next agenda item. If the board needs to go into an executive session, they will call into a separate conference line, and all video and audio on Zoom will be temporarily turned off until they are ready to return to the regular meeting. The results and staff comments will be posted on the city website at www.charleston-sc.gov/BAR. And these meetings are being recorded.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Let's go to agenda item number 1, 93 Congress Street.
93 Congress Street is requesting approval for complete demolition of the existing dwelling. The building is not rated in the North Central neighborhood and have the address wrong. The date of construction is 1916 per city directories, and it's in the historic material demolition purview. This is an aerial image just showing you where the building's located between King and Dingle. Here are just a couple images to familiarize you with the building. This is looking west on Congress Street and looking east. This is the 1944, 51, and 55 Sanborn maps, showing you the footprint of the building hasn't changed. And with that, I'll turn it over to the applicant. We have Ms. Manali, Hightower, and Mr. Burnett. Whenever you're ready, you have the floor.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. So sorry. This is obviously a challenge to start off right out of the gate with the Zoom conference. But at any rate, I wanted to just thank all of the bar members. We appreciate for y'all's time this evening and allowing us to have this application. My name is B. Hightower. I'm an attorney with the South Carolina Disaster Recovery Office. Our address is located here in Columbia at 632 Rosewood. That's 29201. We have applied for a demolition of an entire demolition of the home. This is at 93 Congress Street. A little background about us and our program with South Carolina Disaster Recovery is back in October 5th of 2015, when the floods hit and the disaster hit, the storm hit the state of South Carolina. Then Governor Haley commissioned and put together by order the South Carolina Disaster Recovery Office. The reason why she put that office together, or put our office together, is because the Housing and Urban Development funded a flood program to help with the recovery in the state of the South Carolina throughout 22 counties that were hit by the flood. Monies were allocated pursuant to community development block grants for disaster recovery. Our program under this HUD funded grant, we're right at 1,792 houses, either repaired, reconstructed, and people back in safe and secure and sanitary homes. This is one of the tail end of our cases that we are asking for assistance, and certainly wanted to touch on for y'all, as with any federally funded program, there's strict compliance requirements. We have to comply with all regulations, the Clean Air Act, the Environmental Protection Act, and certainly the National Historic Preservation Act, I think is important for us to touch on, given the spirit of the bar and what y'all stated intentions to do. Certainly, we, in looking at the National Historic Preservation Act, we have contract out with an architectural historian. She has researched the property. She has researched the area. We have submitted her reports and all required documents to the state historic preservation officer, an office Mr. John Silvas. They've looked at this and they've indicated that this property itself does not qualify for any listing on the historic registry, and that certainly no areas around it require or our project going forward, which is the reconstruction of this home, the demolition of it, is going to impact any historic preservation effort or entities around there. In fact, the closest one that they found was the Greek Orthodox Church nearby. But certainly we've done what we've needed to do for our program, for federal funding guidelines, for state guidelines to move the project forward. And then of course, that's what brings me here today with y'all. Certainly my understanding of reading the city of Charleston's ordinances and working on this project um, for our applicants. Their names are George and Helen Ellington. They are in their 80s. They are on a fixed income. They receive Social Security. Mr. Ellington is in poor health. They certainly, from a HUD-funded community development block grant, they qualify for our program 100%. They are they're low income. They are at the 30% threshold. Their home has been substantially damaged by the disaster, by the event. They own it. They live there, primary residency, all of those hurdles have been cleared. But so that's what brings us here with y'all today. My understanding is that our first step in complying with the city ordinances and with the city requirements is that we needed to request what our program is asking to do, and that is the demolition of this home and a reconstruction. And I want to get into the actual reconstruction later in the presentation, but for this purpose right here, we did our own assessment, damage assessment. There is a strict formula that we follow. And certainly as I'm talking through these, Ms. Kim, if you would go ahead and just advance as I go through, probably through, I think I've noted through page 18. But as you can see, our programmatic assessment of this home at 93 Congress Street is that complete electrical system damage, the roof damage and deteriorating, needs to be repaired, the walls, and you can continue to forward if you don't mind, Kim. The exterior, the repairs, certainly there's significant damage there. As I stated, my understanding is that our assessment has identified that the roof itself needs to be replaced. The molding and the plaster, certainly, as you can see, significantly damaged. Some of these photos here, non-working fireplace, you start to see the mold and the mold presence. And there's more where here you can see where the water lines have come in. And again, substantial damage to the walls, the house, the structure itself. Then this is the flooring underneath it. We've got significant concerns about what's underneath there and getting into the house. And so for all of these reasons, and I touch on, we also have to comply with lead-based paint testing, abatement, presence, and those standards, as well as asbestos. And both of our experts in each one of those fields have, in fact, determined that there is lead-based paint throughout the house that needs some abatement and removal. Asbestos' presence in the house needs remediation, disposal, and of course, we would comply with all of those environmental requirements that we would have to take them to the necessary environmentally correct disposal sites. The Mr. and Mrs. Ellington, like I said, they're in their 80s. They have been moved out. They've moved out of their house right at our initial damage assessments when I identified just how much is it's not safe for them to be there, obviously. So we look at this and we were asking for the reconstruction to take down, and what we really would absolutely like to do under our program financial constraints is to build back something appropriate, something that takes into the needs of our applicant, your citizen, and certainly what I think or what I'm arguing or ask y'all to consider certainly meets the needs of the spirit of the bar, and as I read it and understand it. One thing that I would like to put in front of you or ask y'all to consider is that we are uniquely situated in our request of the bar. We are certainly not a developer. We're the state of South Carolina administering a disaster recovery program. We certainly do not, our financial constraints, we do not have the financial wherewithal to take this house to its studs and rebuild it back as a $1 million property. I certainly that is not what we can do. But what we can do, what I ask for you to understand or to consider or hear us, is that if we could get it cleared and get the demolition, we want to work cooperatively with the city of Charleston. I certainly want to go hand in hand as we move forward on it, because as I understand and read the ordinances and requesting a certificate of appropriateness so that we can build back, what we want to build back is a shotgun style home. And I'll touch on that as well as we can go through. If you'll go ahead and forward through these pictures.
Ms. Hightower, just a note, we've got about a minute left on your presentation.
Okay, so fast forward, and if we could just inherit in your ordinances, you want to ensure a harmonious collaboration. And if you look at these properties, if you'll go forward again, specific, keep going. Keep going. Okay, keep going. If you look, stop right there. If you look, this is directly across the street. That's a shotgun style house. The house
Ms.
next
Hightower,
to it. Yes, ma'am. Yes,
I'm sorry to interrupt you. We are not to discuss what comes next.
Okay.
The purview of this board is to determine whether or not this particular building can be demolished.
Okay, and I appreciate that, and I'm sorry if I got way over the line. I'm trying to step up to the line, because the argument here is that in order for us to make our arguments heard about why this case should be demolished, is certainly to take the next step and look at the whole picture of having a harmonious situation where what we can do under our program. So it's certainly, I understand that it just, I wanted you to understand that certainly with the Dingle Street properties across and up the street and across the street, we certainly can and are willing to work hand in hand with the city to do that. Again, we mentioned we work with an architectural historian. We lean heavily on that. I would like for the entire process to be able to see apples to apples. But Mr. Ellington, he is wheelchair dependent. He is losing his vision. His health is declining. Certainly within our program constraints and abilities, and a reconstruction is what we are willing or able to do, and certainly willing to help. Again, our national objectives is to take care of blight, is serve low to moderate income people, and certainly we can do that. Our proposal is to reconstruct in the exact same footprint. I just wanted to make sure I touched on everything, and certainly reading the ordinances and what I understand. We just want to be collaborative. As I also understand, the ordinances would allow for a review period for what we could propose. Is that something here that we need to address, or ask for a deferment so that we can have an entire package? It's unclear on how I investigated or read all of this. So certainly I just want to appeal to y'all for the fact that this home right here is not something that we're able to rehabilitate, but what we can do is that we can reconstruct something that is harmonious with the environment and what is already in that neighborhood. Your ordinances speak to the surrounding and the immediate areas. So there's that. And again, it's hard to not argue what we can do, as you said, Ms. Kim, but certainly I thought that was important for y'all to understand. On the call with me, obviously, is Lori Manali, who's our project supervisor for Person Service Corp. That's our builder. Chris Burnett, he should be on the line. He's the vice president for disaster services. They've been working with us throughout this program. They have repaired and reconstructed homes, and they stand ready to answer any questions that y'all might have. but certainly this is where we are, and certainly appreciate your time this afternoon and answer any questions you may have. Thank
Thank you,
you.
Ms. Hightower. I'm going to open it up to a few board questions.
I just have one. I think it might be for staff. It seems to me, looking at the Sanborn maps, that there was an addition at some point. I don't know if you have any indication of the age of the addition, as opposed to that original core with the one-story, you know, presumably like a shed roof at the back.
This portion back here.
Yeah, it just seems like it got, the rear porches are now west, it's longer than that. I was just curious if you had any indication of the age of basically the back of the building.
I apologize, Ms. Martin. You're breaking up a little bit, but I believe I certainly will look to Mr. Burnett or Ms. Monley if they heard you and can address that question. My understanding is, and I'm guessing here, so I hate to guess in front of you, Ms. Martin, is that it is just all one structure. Looking at the maps in front of it, it looks like it's, if you wanted to advance through, looking at the maps and looking at the pictures, it's all one structure. I see the fencing on the background, but I apologize, I can't address that question directly, ma'am.
Thank you.
Do we have any other board questions? Or Kim, did you have anything you wanted to add?
It just to kind of touch on, Julia, you cut out a little bit, but I understood your question to kind of be, do you know any of the history of the additions of this building? And we found it was built in 1916, and it looks like there was a one-story portion at one point with, and now it's been partially enclosed and turned into a porch, so.
Thank you.
Glenn, I just have one quick question that may be a little out of order, but I just wanted to think about or put on the table. The elevation of the existing house that's being requested for demolition, I would think would probably come close to behooving someone with mobility issues, and that it is not high up off the ground. Have you thought through the possibility of a rehabilitation or a renovation of this house, because it would be a little more friendly to someone who has trouble, you know, getting up steps and so forth? I'm just guessing that new construction would likely have to be, you know, further up in the air.
It's in an X zone. I hope you guys can hear me, but it's in
We
an
can.
X zone.
Okay.
Chris, are you able to unmute and address Mr. Gardner's question about the ability of accessibility from this standpoint versus accessibility from what we can put back in its place with the other design?
Yeah, this is Chris Burnett. What the program allows is for us to be able to put a ADA ramp onto a structure, and based off of the current setback for this home, there is no way that we could feasibly put in a wheelchair ramp to allow him to gain access to his home. But we have designed a new home that would be able to allow him to get around his new home, but based off of the current home, there's not a cost reasonableness that can be done to accommodate Mr. Ellington.
Okay.
Do we have any other board questions now? Hearing none, we'll move on to public comment.
We have both Historic Charleston Foundation and Preservation Society signed up to speak. And we will hear from April Wood first. April, you have the floor.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. HCF has reviewed the request for the complete demolition of the historic building at 93 Congress Street. We are sorry to see this historic structure in the condition it is in today, and we appreciate the effort to help the Ellingtons remain at this property. This building contributes to the historic character of the neighborhood and with effort can be successfully rehabilitated with proper flood mitigations. We believe it is important that this historic structure is retained, and we recommend denial of the application. We suggest that the South Carolina Disaster Recovery Office explore partnerships with some local affordable housing programs, such as the Palmetto Community Land Trust or Palmetto CAP, to see if there are some ways that resources can be combined to rehabilitate this project for these people to remain in this house. Thank you.
And we also have Anna Catherine Carroll.
Thank you. Anna Catherine Carroll with the Preservation Society of Charleston. Would like to echo the comments of Historic Charleston Foundation. This is a highly unfortunate situation. We are certainly sympathetic to the challenges that the current property owners are facing, and we applaud the applicant for their efforts to mitigate those challenges. However, we are opposed to this request for wholesale demolition. While this property may not be eligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places, it is no less significant and contributory to the streetscape of Congress Street. Based on the materials submitted, it appears that the historic footprint, as well as the historic form and a significant level of historic material is intact. And we have seen far worse properties in far worse conditions successfully rehabilitated, and we feel confidently that this is a possibility for this particular property. We would also echo the suggestions that Historic Charleston Foundation has presented, and we would just encourage the applicant to get creative in their approach, and we'll hope for the best outcome in this situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that do we have anybody else that is speaking?
That's all.
Thank you, Kim. All right, let's move on to comments from the city staff and a recommendation from the city.
So the Secretary of the Interior Standards for Rehabilitation guides the BAR to provide consistent and clear recommendations to owners and developers. The principles recommend protection and maintenance rather than wholesale demolition. Additionally, from the policy statements incorporated into the ordinance, number 5 states, it's important to maintain the historic fabric of Charleston as much as possible. Therefore, deteriorated historic features should be repaired rather than replaced. Also, this building is indicative of the vernacular of the North Central neighborhood and has significant amount of historic material that's in repairable condition. While we sympathize with the owner, we urge him to consider rehabilitating the building. The City of Charleston's Housing and Community Development Department has grants and funding opportunities available. And lastly, I wanted to mention that ADA accessibility does not need to meet zoning. For these reasons, the staff's recommending denial. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. We'll move back to the applicant, Ms. Hightower, or I believe there's Mr. Burnett or Ms. Manali. Did you have anything that as part of the city staff comments that you wanted to specifically respond to, or any?
Yes, please. I appreciate that. And I also will leave room for Mr. Burnett or Ms. Molly to comment, as well as to the constraints of the rehabilitation. It is, while we have obviously appreciate the suggestions to reach out to other entities that may be able to provide the necessary and needed funding to do what needs to be done in order to completely rehabilitate this property. We have reached out to our VOADs, our volunteers who organize around disaster recovery. Certainly, again, the challenges here are not only the costs, but also the nature of getting into the rehabilitation, what's underneath the floors. There are certainly structural concerns that we have that it just is, the cost it's cost prohibitive given our financial constraints of what we can do. And I have to circle back around. I have to circle back around. This house itself, where it sits on Congress Street, if you look across the street, you want to talk about the architectural nature of the structures in the immediate vicinity, which the zoning ordinance require. You look in the immediate vicinity, and those are the shotgun style houses. Those are the houses that certainly we can do with a with an eye towards making sure that we're compliant with the wood-sided windows, and then of course making it safe with the impact resistant windows, and elevating it to what it needs to be, and also accommodating, as Mr. Burnett said, accommodating it for what it needs to be for our applicant, the city of Charleston's residents. As we stated, both of them are on fixed incomes. We have constraints as well. And I would just encourage or ask the bar members to consider the fact that the immediate area and up Dingle Street, there certainly are some new builds along that street that look exactly like the shotgun house that we would be proposing to do. Trying to meet a national objective to help with blight, to help with low income communities. We certainly stand ready to do that as well, with the permission to take down this structure. And again, I just would say that this structure itself, I understand with its 2-story and how it appears, aside from the fact that it's dilapidated and falling down, but how it might have appeared in the 1916s, or our finding was that it was built sometime in the early 30s. But at any rate, I would just encourage us to look at the entire area, and we can work towards complementing and do something not only for the applicant, but that meets the spirit of the bar as well, and something that we would be fully funded.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. We've got just a short period here, about a minute left, and this is specifically just to respond to anything that the city staff said, to provide clarification. So since we have just about a minute left, did you want any of the other, do you want Chris or anyone to speak?
Yeah, Chris, if you want to jump in here, and again, I appreciate your indulgence. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hightower.
Yeah, this is Chris Burnett. I don't have anything additional to add other than we do have program constraints that the state has to qualify through HUD with their action plan, that we have to stay within those guidelines. But I mean, at the end of the day, we can only do what our client is allowing us to do.
Thank you, Mr. Burnett. I'm going to now open it up for board discussion and a vote.
All right, I can start. Is my microphone working? Do I sound normal?
It sounds better. It's clearer now.
Okay, good. So I was just gonna kind of speak to Ms. Hightower for a second, and I don't know that you've attended a lot of our meetings, but it's kind of hard to impress us with dilapidated buildings, because by comparison to so many that we've seen, this one appears to be in relatively decent condition. And we've seen buildings in much worse condition be successfully repaired. And I mean, I believe that there was a substantial addition to this house sometime after the 40s and 50s. I believe that maybe the second half of it is much less historic, and I would personally be willing to entertain a request for partial demolition if that were substantiated, just to maintain that original core that is clearly still there. And just again, for Ms. Hightower's benefit, we have no purview over what might be built in its place. So that's really not something we can even consider. And as far as I know, we don't really have the latitude to factor in financial considerations or, personal considerations. Very much, we're simply here to judge the architecture and the merits of of a structure. So with all that said, I'm aligned with staff, and I have to agree that this building should not be completely demolished.
Fillmore Wilson here. I am in agreement largely with staff comments and with Julia. The only thing we have purview over is whether we preserve this building, its contributing features, and its form. We don't have purview or to allow it to be demolished. We don't have purview over anything else, or we really can't consider anything else under our guidelines. And I agree. I think that with careful study, there might be parts of this building that it would make sense to demolish. That would have to be demonstrated. So I am not opposed to an abbreviated plan, and I would hope that there is the opportunity for the applicant to work with local agencies in finding additional funding, because I understand that it seems like the principal problem here in the preservation of this building is financial. It's not, I don't think it's designed for other considerations. This building, I am sure, with some very careful planning, could be made handicap accessible. So I am in line with Julia's comments and with staff comments, and I'm in favor of preserving the building.
Lynn Gardner, I really am completely aligned really with Julia and Fillmore's comments at this point. I'm familiar with the building. I actually wonder relatively often why it's sitting there in the condition it is, when, you know, I know that neighborhood is a desirable place to be. And I think Julia's right in a lot of respects, as far as I would encourage a second look at the building, a study of the perhaps generational growth of the building, and hopefully an ability to adapt the building with a different application for perhaps a partial demolition. But I don't think a wholesale demolition is appropriate here, and the board, you know, unfortunately, well, either fortunately or unfortunately, it depends on the day, we are not allowed, you know, in our charge from the city, we're not allowed to take financial constraint into consideration, even though that doesn't mean that we don't have a heart to understand, you know, what is happening here. I think we all would likely agree that the goal would be for the owners to be able to return to their home. At the same time, it's our charge to help protect the city. And so hopefully those can meet in the middle somewhere. And, you know, I'll cross my fingers that maybe there's a way to tweak the program, or to even utilize a different program, because they certainly are not one size fit all. And I'm sure there are constraints and rules that have to be applied and agreed upon.
This is Bill. I would say I do agree with the staff's recommendation and the comments of the other board members. And really, again, just to reiterate the point that we do have a level of consistency with this board that I believe, to Julia's point about the condition of buildings that we've seen buildings in a lot worse condition. So I think obviously the consistency of what we do is also an important point. And in that instance, I believe staff's recommendation is appropriate.
Sounds like we have some consensus here amongst the board. Do we have a motion?
Fillmore here. I'll make a motion for denial of demolition.
I have a motion for denial of demolition on the table. Do I have a second?
This is Bill. I'll second.
All right, I will now put it to a vote. Glenn?
Yay in favor.
Julia,
Yay in favor?
Fillmore,
Yay in favor.
Bill.
Yay in favor.
Chair votes with the majority. The motion carries unanimously.
All right. Well, thank you all very much for your afternoon. I'm sorry if I went on too long. The two names that were suggested that we contact, that was Palmetto Cap and the community. Who could I call that?
I believe you contact April Wood at Historic Charleston Foundation. She was the one who I believe provided those names.
Historic Charleston. All right.
And Charleston's Housing and Community Development.
Housing, Community, and Development. All right. Well, I will pursue Ms. Wood and see what else we can try to come up with. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hightower. We'll move on to the next agenda item. As I said at the beginning of the meeting, agenda item number 2 was withdrawn by the applicant. We'll move to agenda item number 3, 56 Cannon Street.
For me, while I move through number 2. Okay, 56 Cannon Street is requesting conceptual approval for the new construction of 2 single-family houses in the rear and a new masonry wall at front. It's in the Cannonboro Elliottboro neighborhood, and the main house was constructed in 1865. It's in the old city district. And this is an aerial just to familiarize yourself with the property. It's on the north side of Cannon, close to Cumming Street. Here's some existing site photos. This is looking east on Cannon. Looking west on Cannon. This is the survey card from 1985 showing the cool picture of the existing house. Sanborn maps from 1888 and 1902 show pretty similar footprint. This project went to the board on May 28th, 2020, and different architect brought it with a different proposal, and it was denied based on staff comments. And then so staff was recommending denial for height, scale, and mass and general architectural direction. Some of the previous board comments were there will be high visibility, and this proposal would read as one large mass or structure. Another comment, there's not much breathing room between buildings. Another board member said the program is very aggressive, parking doesn't function, and program overwhelms the site. And another board member said mass is too great, architectural direction lacks delicacy. And if Mr. Gould wants to take it from here.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Hello. All right. This is Andrew Gould with New World Byzantine. Kim, could you go to the first slide?
Andrew, you want to let me know which slide you want?
Well, just go, I think there's one more before this. Yeah, there, I think that's the beginning. All right, so the existing house on the lot has already been restored quite recently by a different design team. So if I'll just point out that, you know, they've done a little bit of landscaping on the site, but the driveway in the backyard remain yet to be improved. If you go on to the next slide. Gosh, I don't know why this is jumping all over the place. Can you go back?
Sorry, I may have had this out of order.
Okay, that's the next one. Just a couple things I'd like to point out about the house. Prior to the recent renovation of this house, it had 4 apartments in it. And you can see in that slide there, the remnant of the 4 electric meters, now reduced to 2. So part of the program of this whole project for the current owner was to restore that old house back to its original duplex configuration. You can see from the 2 entry doors that it was always a duplex. And then to reestablish those 2 units with 2 new houses in the backyard. And it is zoned for that. It's a large enough lot to support 4 units. I'll also point out that this house is somewhat unusual in the neighborhood of having had a 3rd occupied story. You can see from the window up there that it had a room up there. So if you go on to the next slide.
Must have put these in twice. My apologies.
All right. Well, what we're seeing here is the backyard where the houses are proposed. You went through those very quickly. Could you go back to some of those backyard images? Yeah, so this is standing all the way at the back of the lot, looking to the front. You can see there's plenty of space back there. And it's so far back that the visibility is really quite limited from the street, and all of those trees up towards the front of the driveway will remain. And then go to that slide. Well, maybe, yeah, go to the slide showing the, all right, well, this is right behind the existing house, looking east. And so go forward a couple of slides.
Which way is forward?
Here we are, stop here. All right, of interest, I wanted to show you the lot next door to the right. So our property is the blue house on the left here. The property on the right has a historic rear building. That gray house in the back is actually a very old house, and it is situated at 90 degrees to the front house. And I'm showing you that because I'm doing a similar siting in my proposed building. So it's interesting that the very similar lot right next door has a 19th century house oriented perpendicular like that at the back. So go on to my site plan. Here we are. So what you can see here is that I have designed 2 very narrow houses. Each of these houses is less than 16 feet wide. And the back one is oriented perpendicular, just like on the property next door. You can actually see that house shaded in next door on this survey. It's almost exactly the same footprint as my proposal. And the main reason I've done this is to respond to the board's comments about the previous submittal. Unfortunately, the other architect won't allow me to show his drawings as part of my application, but essentially his application was 2 houses with a kind of a fatter, squarer footprint, which were lined up all in a row directly behind the existing house. And so all 3 houses were quite close together, and they were all aligned along the west side, so that when you looked up the driveway, you got the impression of a single 250-foot long monolithic building all the way down the lot. And the board expressed that this was not giving enough breathing room to the existing house and did not look well up the driveway. So I've addressed this by making my houses narrower and orienting them, as you see here, to kind of pull them back and away from the view. So go on to the next page. So here you can see a section through the site. So you can see there's a significant amount of space between the existing building and my proposed structures. In order to make the houses narrower, I've made them 2.5 stories. And that of course allows me to tighten up the footprint considerably and to pull them back from the structure. Go on to the next one. So here we see the elevation views of the first house, which is pretty well concealed behind the existing building. Mainly it would be the porch that's visible. And in order to keep these buildings no taller than the existing house, they're on a slab construction, just one step up off of the ground, with a nearly at grade porch. And they're overall pretty diminutive structures, less than 30 feet tall. And I wanted to keep the massing and the fenestration really simple and orderly, because I think that's important in a small structure, particularly when there's multiple structures on one lot, to keep them quiet and orderly. Go on to the next slide. So that's the back side, the two back sides of that house, which would really not be visible. And going on to the next one. So then go back one. There you are. So this is the rearmost house. It's exactly the same, except for the configuration of the porch. And I'll go on. Yeah, go on to the next. Yeah, and so the back sides of that house, and go on.
Mr.
And
Gould, just to let you know, you got about 2 minutes left.
Oh dear, really? Well, I'll try to be quick. There's with a fair amount to say here. Anyway, these are the floor plans. You can see it's a very tight 4-bedroom floor plan. Go on to the next one. The other house is essentially the same floor plan. Go on. Most interesting here is the building section. Because the house is less than 16 feet wide, it's literally impossible to do a half story under a normal gable roof. There would not be enough headroom in order to get up the staircase and be able to walk beside the staircase. So for a house this narrow, the only way to do a half story is a gambrel roof, like you see here, real classic American form. And it allows me to keep this house extremely short, despite having an occupiable 3rd floor. And you can see I have excellent details here, traditional siding, very good thick wood trim profiles, as all of my buildings have. Go on to the next one. Window details, good heavy sills, beaded casing, all of the excellent historic details you're used to with my structures. And then lastly, I'm proposing a masonry frontage wall on the which would go there on the front of the site. You can see the details with masonry piers and cast iron elements, which is similar to historic frontage walls you see up and down that street. Go on to the renderings. So looking up the driveway, you can see the visibility is really quite limited of the front house, and the rear house is 250 feet back there. And the gambrel roof helps considerably with keeping the appearance of the house to be quite low, particularly the frontmost of those two houses. It very much just looks like two stories from the street. Going on, you can kind of flip through these renderings, moving back down the driveway. And there we are at the back of the lot, and going on to the next one. So here you can see the detail a little bit better with the relationship between the two houses, the way these two porches relate and have a little shared garden space. Yep, going on. Yeah, and I quite like this view where you can better understand the shape of the gambrel roof and the relationship of the porches. All of these buildings would be under common management as short-term rentals, so that there's not as much need for privacy between these houses as you might need in owner-occupied structures. And I think I'll stop there. I have more slides, which I will show in response to city comments, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Gould. I will open it up now to any board questions. I actually have one. Mr. Gould, what is the distance between the two houses? Just, do you have a slide showing that? I saw sort of angular views, but
Yes, let me measure that for you right now. So the distance from the back of the existing house to the new house is 19 feet.
okay.
Andrew, is all the driveway surface proposed to be gravel? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I have not gotten to that level of detail in the plans. I anticipate it would, at least the front part of it would be a brick apron. But yeah, I imagine that'd be mostly gravel towards the back, but I'd be interested in board guidance on that.
I was curious about the ordinance and its definition of a half story, and it doesn't specifically talk about gambrel roof forms. So I don't know. I mean, I guess it's open to interpretation what a half story is.
Well, that's true. I'm not asserting that my gambrel roof necessarily meets the ordinance definition of a half story. That is kind of a gray area, but nevertheless, we're in a 3-story height district, so I'm compliant regardless.
Do we have any more board questions at this time? Okay, let's move on to public comment. Kim, do we have anyone? It looks like we've got Anna Catherine.
We do. Anna Catherine Carroll, you have the floor whenever you're ready to speak.
Thank you, Kim. Anna Catherine Carroll with the Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society is not supportive of this proposal for new construction, which is not appropriately subordinate to the historic house fronting Cannon Street. This is a traditional single house site, and per the general requirements of Section 54306, dependency structures shall be subordinate in height, scale, and mass to the primary building. Although this is a gambrel roof over a 2-story building, it reads as a 3-story building, and 3-story dependency buildings are inappropriate behind a 2-story primary historic building. Further, we feel that the gambrel roof design actually makes the roof structure appear more massive and is stylistically out of context with surrounding architecture. So we would ask the board to deny this request. Thank you.
We also have April Wood.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. HCF has reviewed the application for conceptual approval for the new construction of 2 single-family houses in the rear and a new masonry wall at the front. While we have no objection to the architectural direction of the proposed new buildings, we do not believe that these structures are sufficiently subordinate to the historic structure at the front. The ridge of the new buildings should be shorter than the ridge of the historic structure. We recommend deferral of this application so that the height can be restudied. The masonry wall at the front is attractive, and we recommend approval of this element. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have one letter from the Cannonboro-Elliottboro Neighborhood Association that I will read. Dated February 11th, 2021. Kim, the applicant presented the project at our December neighborhood meeting. The new concept is overwhelmingly better than the previous submittal for 56 Cannon Street. The design and details of the 2 structures will complement the front building as well as the surrounding properties. This project will only enhance the historical fabric of the Cannon Street block and neighborhood. The Cannonboro-Elliottboro Neighborhood Association, CENA, voted unanimously to support the project. We recommend approval to the board. Sincerely, Marion Hawkins, President of the Cannonboro-Elliottboro Neighborhood Association. And I believe that's it for our public comments. Sam, is that right?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Hearing from the public, I'll now open it back up to Mr. Gould. Did you have any anything that you wanted to respond to, anything you wanted to clarify?
Do you want me to respond to that before staff comments?
Yes, let me move to, excuse me, Kim, let's do city and staff comments, and then Mr. Gold, I'll come back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Although the design relates very little aesthetically to the historic house or other historic secondary buildings in the neighborhood, the design of each building is well done with good proportions and detailing. That said, the BAR has consistently required any secondary building to be subordinate to the primary historic building. As a 3-story building behind a 2-story primary historic house, this proposal is not successfully subordinate as required in section 54-306, paragraph 12, which states that additional buildings and additions to buildings that are subject to the jurisdiction of the BAR shall be subordinate in height, scale, and mass to the primary building. Charleston Standards Policy Statement reinforces that guidance with point number 8, which states new construction should be sympathetic to the historic features that characterize its setting and context. To respect the significance of the historic context, the new work should respect the historic materials, features, size, scale, proportions, and massing of its setting. Also compounding the issue of insubordination is that there are 2 buildings. It would be better if there were only 1 building sited further away from the historic precedent. The proposed site plan is almost completely built out with either building, driveway, or parking, and there's no green space, which is atypical of the neighborhood. And lastly, the gambrel roof form is concerning as it's not consistent with the neighborhood in Charleston in general. There are examples in Charleston, but the vast majority of them are masonry buildings with a parapet wall and not wood frame. The stylistic details of the gambrel roof are unsuccessful here. For these reasons, we're recommending denial. For height and massing out of character with staff comments noted and approval for the wall.
Thank you, Kim. Now, Mr. Gold, I'll let you respond.
Sure. While I start, if you could, Kim, go to those gambrel precedent images at the end of my slideshow. So I'll start by talking about the massing on the subordination question. This is
Andrew,
yes.
When did you submit? Sorry, you said the additional photos you submitted?
They were
email?
At the end of, they were at the end of my slide PowerPoint, but the revised version I sent you, maybe you have the old version in there.
Let's see if I can find it real quick.
Okay. I'll talk about the subordination question. Of course, this is a point of contention frequently, how to apply the subordination rule for a project that is not a classic main house dependency house kind of relationship like this. As you know, we've done many sort of backyard multi-building developments where we are not seeking a relationship of a sort of primary residence, servants' quarters, carriage house dependency. And the board has often entertained it that it is sometimes appropriate for rear buildings to be a bit more substantial and significant. And one of the cases where this would seem to be appropriate is if the front building was never a sort of primary residence mansion type of building. In this case, the front building was built as a duplex. It's a sort of tenement type structure with some big additions on it. It's not a sort of pure example of a landowner's residence. And these buildings we're building in the back are not really dependencies. They're buildings of equal significance in that this is going to be, the whole lot is going to be a short-term rental compound under common management. And of course, there's 2 structures in the back, which right there undermines that sort of classic mansion carriage house relationship that subordination is predicated upon. So I guess I would just point to many other backyard multi-building developments we've done, and I'll say the board has in the past allowed those rear buildings to be as tall or taller than the existing house when the program of the site seems to make it appropriate, and when the history of the existing structure, does not demand that structure be treated as a architectural primary building, as I believe to be the case here. I'll also point out that, of course, the previous applicant did submit 2-story houses in a more normal siting behind the existing house, and the board hated that and denied it. They said that the footprints were too fat, the buildings were too close together. It read as one building when you looked up the driveway. So I've tried to address that previous denial by doing everything I could to make these buildings narrower, so that you see more open space, you see more clearance when you have that view up the driveway. So I think the board ought to give me some consideration that, yes, my proposal is a little bit non-standard, but a more standard proposal was already submitted and that was denied. And I'm trying to find a solution to that. So now, speaking of the gambrel roof, Kim, if you could go back to the first of these slides. I think you're at the end of this one now. There are gambrel roofs all over Charleston. Many of the oldest houses in Charleston have gambrel roofs. It's of course a really distinctively American form, one of the hallmarks of American architecture. And in Charleston's early 18th century history, they were ubiquitous. Kim, are you able to go back to those 18th century ones at the beginning there?
Mr. Gould, we've got about another minute for response.
I understand.
I have the pictures that you sent me, Andrew,
Yes,
separately in an email.
that's fine.
Which one would you like to look at?
Well, I think they're just numbered consecutively. Start with the 18th
The one?
century example. There we are. Yeah, so these are some of the oldest houses in Charleston. The Pink House and the house on Stoll's Alley, which I'll point out is wood. Many of the examples I have here are in fact wooden gambrel roofs. If you go on to the next one.
I'm doing this manually, so not the easiest way. We're going backwards in order, huh?
Okay, here we are. So here we have a house on Trad Street with a huge wooden gambrel roof, another 18th century house on Church Street with 2 stories plus a gambrel roof, much like my proposal. Go on to the next one. Yeah, and here again on Trad Street, another house with a gambrel. And the next one. So these early 20th century colonial revival houses are probably an even better precedent for what I'm proposing. Here's 2 that are north of the crosstown. And if you could show that one on Smith Street, the yellow one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this may be my best precedent here. This is a 2.5-story early 20th century house at the corner of Smith Street and Bull Street, a very beautiful building. And it has 2 gambrel forms, a wider one facing Smith Street and a narrow one facing Bull Street. And it's got shed dormers on it, very similar. Everything about how this is detailed is very similar to the buildings I'm proposing. And then the last contemporary examples, that's one on Ashley that was recently built, and then go to Catfiddle Street. I have some particular expertise with gambrel roofs because this is my own house on Catfiddle Street, which has both a masonry gambrel roof and a wooden gambrel roof. So anyway, I'm just showing you all this to show you that, although gambrel roofs are uncommon in Charleston, they're by no means unheard of in Charleston, and, people react really well to them. And I, given that the board has routinely allowed modernist architects to build, buildings with odd massing and flat roofs and all sorts of features that one doesn't see on historic single houses, I think a traditional proposal ought to be allowed similar freedom to use some less than normative traditional roof features when they suit the programs and needs of the site, as they do in this case. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gould. I will now open it up for board discussion and a vote.
This is Bill. I'll go ahead and start. I would say I do believe, as usual, Andrew, these homes are well detailed. I do, however, agree with staff's comment, mainly regarding the potential subordination of these structures. And we do have to look at the context of the two-story single house that's up front, albeit there's a maybe abbreviated garret, but for all intents and purposes, it reads as a two-story. I would say then that I concur with staff's comments and the comments of preservation groups.
I'll follow that. I have zero issue with the notion of a gambrel roof form in and of itself. I also have no issue with the notion of a house that far from the street being oriented perpendicular to the existing house. I guess it's really more a question of the relationship of these two new dwellings to the existing historic house. And I do hear you, Andrew, about the notion of a dependency being somewhat contorted at this point in time, but for better or worse, that's kind of how we gauge these rear structures as we review them. And in this case, I think it's pretty hard to argue that it's that these are subordinate. I mean, I like them. I think they're charming and very nice designs. And you almost threaded a needle for me that is really hard to thread, but I can't quite get there, given the comments that we've heard and the whole picture. And then I was going to make a quick comment about the proposed wall at the front. I like the notion, and it's certainly precedented to have a site wall like that. For consideration, the iron elements feel a little overworked to me, a little too formal for the kind of modest structure that exists currently. So I might suggest considering just toning that down a little bit, but it's just a minor comment. And I do like the proposal for the wall there.
Phil Moore here. I tend to agree with staff and the comments of my fellow board members. I think on their own merit, the designs are very attractive. And I certainly don't have anything against gambrel roofs. As Mr. Gould pointed out, there are a number of really fine examples in Charleston. Almost all those examples, however, are principal houses on the properties and not dependencies, even though I'm sure if you looked hard enough, you could find examples of a dependency with the gambrel roof. My concern is in line with staff and the other comments, and that is that I think in this location, the secondary structures are a little overpowering to the main house, particularly with the height. The third structure, the furthest one back, certainly tends to loom over the historic structure a bit. And the second one back, the roof line is more prominent than the roof line, visually, than the roof line of the historic house. And I think the consideration here is not so much the historical use of that historic house, if it was historically a tenement and a duplex, but rather its architectural style, and its architectural style is clearly a historic single house, and the general pattern of ancillary buildings is subordinate. And so I am in line with staff's recommendations.
Glenn Gardner, I don't really have anything in addition to add. I think everyone who's spoken thus far has fairly well hit the nail on the head. I in general I'm not opposed to the architectural direction, and I appreciate the detailing. But I think it is the massing and the height that begin to overwhelm, you know, a humble, relatively humble single house in the front.
Sounds like we have some consensus among the board. Do we have a motion?
Fillmore here. I will make an attempt at a motion, which would be denial for height and massing with staff comments noted and approval of the wall with a board comment to consider toning down the high style of the ironwork.
Okay, I've got a motion for denial for height, scale, and mass with staff comments, but approval of the wall with a board comment to consider toning down the style of the ironwork. Do I have a second?
Second that.
Okay, I'll put it to a vote. Glenn?
Yay in favor?
Bill?
Yeah, in favor.
Fillmore? Fillmore?
You're muted now.
I muted myself. Yay in favor.
And Julia?
Yay in favor.
And chair votes with the majority, and the motion passes unanimously. All right, we'll move on to agenda item number 4, 259 St. Philip Street.
Agenda item number 4 is 259 St. Philip Street, requesting conceptual approval for new construction of a single-family residence. It's in the Cannonboro-Elliottboro neighborhood in the Old City District. Here's an aerial image just to familiarize yourself with the site. It's at the northernmost point of St. Philip Street, just south of Line. Here is an image of the currently vacant lot. And looking from the northeast at the corner. Some context photos. This is looking west on Line Street. And looking east, and you can see the lot there on the right. Here's some Sanborn maps, just for a little bit of history, 1888 and 1902. This project previously went to the board on January 14th. The motion was conceptual approval with staff comment number 2 and board comment to refine ironwork design, restudy differentiation of volumes, and clarify details at intersection of volumes. And we have Ms. Jennings to present. You have the floor whenever you're ready to speak.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Hi, I'm Ashley Jennings. I'm the architect on the project, and with me tonight, the meeting, I believe, is Colin Colbert, my client. Hi, Colin. Kim, can you start the presentation for us?
Sorry.
So this project went before you not long ago, and we received conceptual approval with a few comments. The staff comment was number 2 was the roof line colliding with a primary volume is awkward. Sorry, and the second comment was to restudy the differentiation of the volumes. The third comment was to refine the ironwork, and the fourth comment was to clarify details at intersections of volumes. So I'm going to run through that with you first, and then we'll talk about the details. Could you move forward, Kim? Not any changes to the site plan or the floor plans per se. But here you can see on the elevations, one of the things that was an issue was the overhang on the lower volume, which we'll call the less dominant volume, was longer than the way that it stepped back from the street. And so the overhang actually came out in front of the primary volume a little bit. And that seemed to be a concern. So we've shortened the overhang on that and refined the detailing there. So we have a little bit of a bead below the overhang. And then to differentiate the volumes, we've actually increased the slope of the roof on the dominant volume. As far as refining the ironwork, the previous submittal had what we thought was a pretty creative wrought iron design, but we refined it and simplified it to still reflect that arch at the top, at least in the loggia in the front, and then to start to mimic that circle on the wrought iron that's at the cantilevered balcony. And finally, we've added a couple of details to clarify the intersections of the volume. So I'll go through the materials too. So once again, we're proposing a brick veneer on the main building that is going to, or the dominant volume is going to be painted white. And then on the lower volume, we are proposing a boral channel gap product that's mitered on the corners, and it will be painted as well. Can you move forward, Kim? And you can see here that once again, we're showing this, what we're calling the dominant volume with the brick. You can see that there's a slot there for a downspout to handle drainage. And then you can see that less dominant volume in the back with the channel gap siding. We're proposing a composite material for an operable shutter. And you can see that those are detailed more like a batten shutter with some tongue and groove material on the recess of the shutter. Can you move to the next slide, please? This is the less dominant volume. You can see it's on the south side of the building. And once again, you see the channel gap. And we're proposing an aluminum clad simulated divided light, double hung window. And then you can see at the bottom, we're showing a slider with the same type of detailing. And then above that, patio door. Move forward, please. This is the rear elevation that faces an adjacent property. Once again, you can see the less dominant volume with the channel gap siding, and then of course the more dominant volume with the brick veneer. We've got a cast stone cap on the parapet wall there as well. Next slide. This is the streetscape. As you can see, really nothing's changed on the overall height of the building except for the ridge line jumps a little bit, but the eave height is still at the same place. And next slide. It's the building section showing how the building goes together. We're looking at truss system to allow for mechanical systems, a slab on grade. Next slide, please. Once again, another section showing how the building's put together. On that rooftop deck, we're proposing an EPDM type of material with a decking on top of it. Next slide, please. These are wall sections showing brick detailing and how the windows go into the wall. You can see the cast stone cap at the top of the parapet wall again. And the custom wood cornice element that we have, it's at the primary volume, the eave. Next slide, please. This is a blow-up plan of the loggia. So you can see that we're proposing a tile material or a silver travertine on the floor. And then once again, the idea here is to build that arcade with a cast in place concrete frame and then brick veneer on top of it to create the arches. Next slide, please. This is just a material palette to show you what we're thinking for the materials. On the far right, you can see the silver travertine that we're proposing for the loggia floor and also for the pool deck. Then you can also see a herringbone pattern wood for the loggia ceiling. The drive is a scored concrete with a rock salt finish. You can see that the painted brick. Then the image below is similar to the effect that the windows and doors would have. This is the boral channel gap is this panel that you can see. Then below that is an architectural shingle for the roof of the dominant volume. We've got the dryer sheet, the dryer vent, and then some light fixtures. Does anybody have any questions?
I'll go ahead and ask one really quick question. I apologize, I don't remember specifically, but were you going to look at slight reduction of ceiling height, or did you? And I just somehow missed it.
I didn't pick that up as a comment on the previous application, but if the board wants to think about that, we could certainly entertain that idea.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry, we missed one drawing.
Do we have any other board questions? Okay, I'll move on to public comment. Tim, do we have anyone speaking?
We do. We have Mr. Trey Sedlick. You have the floor whenever you're ready to speak.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
My name is Trey Sedlick. I am at 79 Line Street, which is the adjacent property to the rear of this building. I think the proposal is not consistent with the neighborhood. I think that the overall scale is inappropriate for this size site. The pool that is being proposed is about a foot from our property line, and it's only 5 feet from our bedroom window. It doesn't allow for privacy, and I don't see any plans for any buffer. We have several trees in very close proximity to the property line and to the proposed pool. We do have an oak tree that is a protected tree. And there's no possibility of constructing this pool and excavating for it that tree could survive. So I don't see any consideration for the existing trees. There's very little landscaping in this plan. I think that there needs to be some added buffer. And it seems like there's also a need for some space for storage, just accessibility around the structure, waste cans, things of that nature. We'd really like to see some added green space, particularly a buffer at the rear to our property. And thank you for bringing that picture. You can see that the 79 is a Freedman's Cottage, and the 81 property is a modest 2-story building. And you know, this structure is almost twice, or easily twice the height of those structures. I don't particularly have so much issue with the height, but more the dominance of the site, and we just appreciate a little bit of buffer and some green space and some privacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sedlik. Do we have any more, anyone else from the public?
I believe that's all we have.
We'll move on to city staff comments and recommendations.
We just have a couple of staff comments. Substantiate the columns and refine the detailing. The drawings need further development of details, notes, and dimensions as it borders on insufficient for preliminary review. And lastly, one of the board comments included in the motion was restudy of fenestration of volumes. And the board should discuss this and determine if the applicant has successfully met this requirement. And if so, we are recommending preliminary approval with staff comments noted and final review by staff.
Thank you, Kim. Ms. Jennings, is there anything that you wanted to respond to or clarify between the public comments and staff comments?
Sure. So first, I'd like to address the neighbors' concerns. As far as the pool goes, I'm an architect. I'm not a landscape architect, and I'm not a pool. I don't build pools. So the pool design is a placeholder right now. And I hope that we'll have an opportunity to look at the detailing further once this project gets further along in design. So I don't want the neighbor to believe that that's the end placement for the pool. As far as the landscaping goes, I think that will be refined as well as we move forward. And as far as the trash, we were intending to locate the trash in the back of the building where you can see that small gate where we've got the mechanical systems. So as far as the staff comments go, I'm not sure I don't understand the first comment, substantiate the columns and refine the detailing. We would be open to that. As far as further development of details, notes, and dimensions, we have a lot of building sections and wall sections in the package, and we'll certainly refine that for final details. As far as the restudy of differentiation of volumes, I think, or maybe I misunderstood, but I thought the intent was to make them, there was a lot of discussion about the eaves. At one point, there was a discussion about perhaps providing a parapet wall for the lower or less dominant element. And we studied that, and it seemed a little odd to have a parapet wall there. We actually even studied the idea of flipping it and putting the parapet wall on the masonry structure. But once again, I think that having an overhang there seemed to be more important. So I hope that the board will consider that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Kim, can I clarify? The request is for conceptual approval and the staff recommendation is for preliminary approval?
That is right. We recommend conceptual approval with final review by staff. Thank you for that clarification.
Okay.
Can I make a comment about that? We had actually intended for preliminary approval. We've already gotten conceptual approval.
Last time.
Okay, so the request is for.
Thanks, Ash.
And that, so the application was for preliminary approval? Okay. I'll open it up for board discussion now. I just wanted to clarify that.
All right, I'll start. It does appear that the applicant has addressed our concerns. I might encourage you actually just to take another look at the ceiling heights, just given the extreme verticality of this. And I apologize if I just don't remember if we talked about that last time or not, but it seems like we would have. And one way or the other, if you'll just look at it and see if it's possible to take a little bit of the verticality out, just a little, that would be helpful. But generally, I think I'm fine with it. And for the neighbors' benefit, this design did already receive conceptual approval, so substantial changes or denial really aren't in the cards at this point. Yeah, I think that's all I've got.
This is Bill. I would say that I agree with staff's comments and recommendation, and with Julia's comments, especially potentially taking a look at some of those floor-to-floor heights. But other than that, I really appreciate the effort, and I believe you've addressed all the issues that I had previously. Thank you.
Glenn Gardner, I agree with the comment about the floor-to-floor height being looked into, and then they certainly need to perhaps speak with the neighbor and consider the future pool design. It sounds like we're only approving or only considering the building itself at the moment, not the pool location and the site planning. So before they would obtain a pool permit, the city would need to look at any affected protected trees on adjacent properties, and that is that's something that zoning would have on their checklist as they did a plan review, and the neighbor could certainly request the zoning department to have a look at that and make sure the trees are being properly worked around.
As a board, could we clarify for the applicant the staff comment to substantiate the columns?
I would ask Kim if she could do that.
Sure. Staff feel that the columns should be, they kind of feel a little flimsy and thin. And if they were a little bit more substantiated and had some detail to them, they might feel like a more solid ground floor foundation for this corner anchoring building.
Thank you, Kim.
All right, if it's okay, I'll try to make a motion at this point for preliminary approval with staff comments 1 and 2, and a board comment to study reduction in the floor-to-floor height, and another board comment to submit a separate site plan addressing landscaping, pool, tree issues.
Okay, we've got a motion on the floor for preliminary approval with staff comments 1 and 2, and a board comment to study the floor-to-floor height, and another board comment to submit a separate site plan addressing the pool and landscaping.
You could just say study reduction of the floor-to-floor height. Otherwise, it's great.
So don't look into it. Study floor-to-floor height for a reduction. Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. We will now put the motion to a vote. Fillmore,
Yay in favor.
Bill,
Yay in favor.
Julia,
Stay in favor.
Glenn.
Yay in favor.
Chair votes with the majority, and the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 5 has been withdrawn. Oh, Julia.
Oh, no, I was just saying bye. I think I'm supposed to say bye now, right?
Oh. Yes, you are. Let me know when Julia has been silent, Kim.
You know, I maybe put on hold. Figure out how to remove her. I haven't had to do that yet. Okay, she is out of, she's in her waiting room right now.
Okay, she's gone from my screen, so I'll take that as a as for being gone. Okay, so moving on to agenda item number 6, 67 America Street.
Bear with me just a moment. Okay, 67 America Street is requesting conceptual approval for the construction of affordable single-family residence. It's new construction in the east side in the Old City District. And here again is an aerial showing the context of the lot in question. It's just south of Hampstead Court and north of Amherst Street. The lot's on the west side of the street. And this image shows the whole lot, including the place of the other buildings that are also on this agenda. And this is looking south down America Street. And this is also looking south. And this one is turned around looking north. Here's some Sanborn maps. Just showing the original building of from 1902, 1944, and 1955 remained unchanged and now is non-existent. This is the bird's eye view map. I can't draw a line to any of those buildings on it, but I thought it was interesting to see these little cottages in the middle of this block.
Could you turn that down?
And if Aaron wants to take it from here, Jeffrey?
Kim?
Jeff is going to start.
Great.
Could you hear me, Kim?
I can.
Kim, Lindsay, thank you to staff and the board. I appreciate the privilege to present these affordable houses that apparently it's the 3rd iteration, and working with the JJR and Julia Martin architectural team, we've come up with what we think is an extraordinarily good proportional plan to really create 6 deed-restricted houses that we will develop, and Julia's office clearly is designing, that will be deed-restricted workforce housing under the Department of Housing and Community Development. Our charge here was really in the Board of Architectural Review area to design proportional, modest houses that look incredibly attractive, that are not distinguishable from a market-based house that we would have built, but try to keep them proportional so we can fulfill the requirements of what the city needs. And we have those economic efficiencies of what we do. And Julia, I'd like to really compliment Julia and Aaron for producing what we think are proportional houses with simplicity that we think will be able to certainly pull this off. And I think working together additionally with staff on some final details and potential differentiation elements, I think we will provide the citizens of Charleston and the Department of Housing and Community Development with an extraordinary little community. And any questions after this that the development team can answer, I'm available. Thank you.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right, this is Erin Lanier with Julia Martin Architects. So by way of a little background, Father Grant's Court is a small, relatively new street that runs east-west off of America Street. There are currently 2 triplexes that were constructed about 10 years ago on the north side. But the south side of the street is a blank slate. And as Jeffrey mentioned, this board has actually reviewed several design proposals for this location in the past when it was configured as 4 lots. But last spring, approval was granted to subdivide those lots for a total of 6. And so we're presenting 6 completely new designs tonight. As I present this first house, which fronts on America Street, I'll provide an overview of the full concept, and then I can go through the houses individually and highlight the details that differentiate each one. So starting with 67 America, we have the existing street view from America Street. This is looking west down the court. The triplex is on the right and a vacant lot to the left behind that fence before you get to the 1-story brick residence. We'll go to the next slide, please. Here are some additional images to give you a sense of our context. The top left, again, is our neighbor to the north. Top right, our properties to the south. And at the bottom, we have the opposite side of America Street, which is largely historic single houses, though there is also a new home there in blue that was constructed in 2016 directly across from our site. And I don't have a photograph, but our property backs up to the church parking lot on Nassau Street to our rear. Next slide, please. So you'll see as we go through the elevations, all 6 houses are related architecturally, but identical. They share a similar floor plan, materials, and overall design aesthetic, but we've changed up some of the features and details so that each house is unique. These are some of the precedent images that have informed our designs and can be found in the surrounding area, both historically and in recent new construction. We're proposing board and batten siding to be used on all 6 houses, but then we've incorporated decorative barge boards, sawn balusters, gable brackets, and scallop siding to add a vernacular character that subtly differentiates each home. Next slide, please. This is an overall survey of the parcels at the top, indicating their subdivision from 4 to 6, and then a proposed site layout at the bottom. You'll see we essentially have 3 plan configurations, which are a response to the variations in grade conditions, lot size, and building orientation. We're mostly in an AE 10 flood zone here, with the grade sloping up from approximately 7 feet above mean sea level at the sidewalk to 11 feet towards the rear of number 19. All 6 lots feature covered porches, ample green space, a trash enclosure, and provide off-street parking. Next slide. These are Sanborn maps for the area, which indicate this was originally a large double lot occupied by a 2.5-story single house, as you see in the top image. Obviously, the city is looking to make more efficient use of the land today for affordable housing, but the concept of a small alley or court certainly has historic precedent in this neighborhood as well. Our first house at 67 America will serve as a continuation of the America Street streetscape, so it's oriented towards the east with parking behind, access via the court. We're proposing rock salt finished concrete driveway runners for the parking at each house and a traditionally detailed wood trash and utility enclosure at the end of the driveways. And then given the diminutive lot sizes here, we're proposing that these houses have many split condenser units, which in this instance will be located on the west elevation. Next slide, please. This is a straightforward plan with our entry located on the long elevation, anchored by a 1-story covered porch oriented towards the street. Each plan is 532 square feet per floor with 2 bedrooms and 2.5 baths. Next slide. So moving to the elevations, I just want to start by pointing out that we're in a 2.5 to 3-story height district, but we're proposing all of these houses be just 2 stories over a modest crawl space. Our finished floor is at the DFE, which is 12 feet above mean sea level, and 67 America has the tallest foundation of the 6 due to the significant grade change coming up from the sidewalk. We're proposing a solid masonry foundation with traditional smooth stucco finish at the main mass, and then at the porch we've introduced sawn vertical slats recessed between the piers to add a little detail. It also serves as a connection to the other designs. As I mentioned, we're using hardy board and batten as the primary siding at each of the houses. And we were originally planning to deal with the seams at the floor levels by hiding them with a trim band, as you see here. But as we studied that further, we decided to go with a very minimal reveal that will be tightly flashed, such that the joint essentially disappears. Windows will be 2x2 aluminum clad, simulated divide light. And then because this is the most prominent house and part of the larger streetscape, we've carried the detail up to the eaves with a decorative barge board and fascia detail that continues that Carpenter Gothic aesthetic you'll see integrated into each of the designs. Next slide, please. We're really liking the 12 and 12 roof pitch and what that does for the gable end proportions. Roofing material will be an architectural shingle, and we'll deal with crawl space ventilation on the driveway side of the house with minimal smart vents. Next slide. Here is our existing and proposed streetscape at America Street, as well as a site section, which shows that change in grade and gives you a preview of our other designs. Next slide. And then finally, we just wanted to go ahead and give you a sense of the color palette we are exploring for the development as a whole. We really like the idea of tying these houses together with a white or light gray siding color, and then offsetting that by painting the doors, window sashes, casing, barge boards, and porch elements a single accent color that would be unique to each house for an effect that's similar to the precedent images in the upper left of the screen. We think this could be a subtle way of highlighting the details in the carpentry without being busy or distracting with too many details. And that is all I have for this one, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Erin. We'll open it up for any board questions at this time. Hearing none, I'll move on to public comment. Kim, do we have any?
We don't.
All right, I'll move to city staff and recommendations.
We only have a couple comments. The buildings are supported wholeheartedly by staff. We would only ask, our one request is that these houses are further differentiated. We discussed this at length with the architect, and she's amenable to looking at all the options with us. So we are recommending conceptual approval with final review by staff.
Okay. Erin, did you want to respond or clarify to anything that Kim said?
No, thank you.
Okay. I'll open it up to board discussion and a vote.
Lindsay or Kim, I have a question. I'm sort of reading how staff made their comment, their first comment for America Street. Staff kind of alluded to, I'm going to say a blanket comment about all the buildings, but procedurally, I'm guessing these need to be discussed individually. I mean, I think Erin has already sort of touched on all of it. I didn't know how you want to handle this.
I think, Lindsay, correct me if I'm wrong. I think that we do need to make motions separately on each of the items. So though she has gone over all of them in mass, we'll go through the line and make motions and recommendations on each.
And I'll keep track. If there is a staff comment that's applicable to all, then I think that we need to adopt those, assuming that they're applicable, adopt those with respect to all of them.
Okay. I'll then start, and I will take the same. I'm just going to make a blanket comment. In that I think at a conceptual level, which is where we are on this, I think these are making a very good attempt at, kind of as Mr. Roberts, I believe, mentioned, having this housing read as equal. And I think if these were constructed the way we're seeing them today, I don't think you would drive past or walk past or live near them and know whether they were market rate houses or part of an affordable program. And I certainly commend that. And so I think that conceptually, as a whole, I am happy with what we are seeing here.
Elmore here. I'm just going to simply say I agree with staff and Glenn on this. I think these are very nice designs, and certainly I agree with Glenn that if they are constructed as designed or with what we see here, then it certainly is going to would be almost impossible to distinguish them from market properties.
This is Lindsay. I just wanted to comment. I agree with Glenn and Fillmore's comments. If they're constructed this way, it would be great. I like the fact that you wouldn't differentiate them from affordable housing versus non-affordable housing. I really like the color palette, and I really like the idea of having maybe a same or similar base color. Maybe that's one way to differentiate is a slightly different base color for each, but then they each have an accent color that pops. I really like that, and that's really all I have.
This is Bill. I think the site planning is creative, and I do believe it's a positive development. I guess only have one point, and I don't know if it's might just me overthinking this a little bit, but I'm seeing a lot of the detailing with the barge boards, et cetera, and I'm kind of hoping that can be stylized to read as obviously contemporary in nature, just because it is sort of a creation of a historic detail. So just as to say that any, Carpenter Gothic detailing, I don't know how to make it more stylized to read as obviously contemporary, but that would be really my only comment. Just be about the detailing and then the potential of that reading as some form of rendition of history.
Do we have a motion on the floor?
I'll make a motion for 67 America Street for conceptual approval, taking board comments into consideration, and final review by staff.
Thank you. Kim, do we need to add an additional staff comment that they need to be further differentiated from one another?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I've got a motion on the floor for conceptual approval with staff comments 1 and new 2 that they be further differentiated from one another. And a board comment to reflect a more contemporary design on the detailing. Bill, did I get your board comment correct?
I guess what I was saying was maybe a more contemporary interpretation of the type of detailing they're going for. And I don't even know if that's possible, but that's a fair statement, I guess.
Okay. Kim, do you have that?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Okay.
And I know we basically have a motion sitting here on the table. I want to be clear that I don't think Bill's directive should water it down. I mean, I like what they have shown as their inspiration. So I just want to kind of are we on the same page there, Bill?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I'd like to, since we seem to still be in discussion about this, I would like to emphasize what Glenn has said. I think that these little buildings with Carpenter Gothic or these Victorian elements executed in even a traditional manner are still, if you look at them, they're still going to read as contemporary buildings. I would be concerned that the implication of trying to make these buildings, quote, read as modern could dramatically diminish what I think is really nice design. And I have another little concern too. I think that the buildings should be differentiated, and I think they can be differentiated very effectively in ways that don't diminish the very attractive design. And so I support the idea of differentiating them, but not to the extent that it has a negative impact on the detailing of these buildings. I think they are really very nice designs, and I think anybody with any understanding would realize these are contemporary buildings.
Fillmore, I'm on the same page as you. I like the detailing. Glenn, you had a comment?
No, I think that's an easily amendable motion if we are all in agreement with the interpretation of it.
Glenn, do you want to restate the motion?
I will restate the motion for conceptual approval with final review by staff, with staff comments or staff's one comment, and board directive to maintain unique detailing without, Bill, help me. You're welcome to.
I would just say to
I've said
to have any stylized detailing, read a more contemporary, obviously more contemporary in nature, not to replicate true historic details.
I'm good with that. I mean, yes, and I think that even may be just dimension of lumber, dimension of the cuts on the trim detail, just so it doesn't appear as if it may have, let's say, been, salvaged from a Carpenter Gothic building and tacked on.
That's right. That was the intent of what I was trying to get at. Thank you.
Sorry, Lindsay, that's messy, but I think we're on the same page.
So we want to maintain the unique detailing, but it needs to read contemporary so as not to be confused with historical detailing.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And where I would, on a side note, I'm going to leave that motion where it is, but I would say, there are some Carpenter Gothic details the board has looked at before as examples from Ms. Martin's work. I'm saying basically don't go over to that street, template that, and replicate it identically, I think is what page I'm on there.
Okay. Thank you, Glenn. Okay, so we've got a motion on the floor for conceptual approval with staff comment to further differentiate the buildings from one another, and a board directive to maintain that unique detailing while also reflecting a contemporary design.
Yes.
Do I have, oh,
This is Bill, I'll second.
okay. Hearing no further discussion, I'll put it to a vote. Fillmore.
Yay in favor, I guess.
Glenn.
Yay in favor.
Bill.
Yay in favor.
Chair votes with the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Moving on to agenda item number 7, 3 Father Grants Court.
Okay. 3 Father Grants Court is requesting conceptual approval for the construction of affordable single-family residence. And we are just going to move to the slides here. And Aaron, you've got the floor whenever you're ready.
All right, so the next 3 houses, numbers 3, 7, and 11, are sort of sister houses, if you will. Their narrow side is facing the street, fronting on the court. If you want to go to the next slide. Actually, go ahead and flip to sheet 5, if you will. Let's see if I get that right. All right, here we go. So like its neighbors, these houses have a 1-story covered porch at the entry, but here we precessed the steps, the driveway and trash enclosure would be the same as the others. And here we'd likely locate any kind of mini split condenser on the rear or south elevation. I'm gonna go to the next slide. Same general idea of the plan, similar footprint as 67 America, 2 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. Next slide. So then here in the elevations, you can see we are continuing a lot of the same materials and elements, such as the board and batten, the windows, the porch columns, But we've switched up the railings and barge board and added a decorative gable bracket to provide some small scale detail at the street facade. The Three Sisters will be differentiated by the accent color as well as the sun details at the porch railing. At number 3, we are proposing a circular cutout at the railing. At number 7, we're using an X picket, and at number 11, we're indicating a diamond cut. We have a higher grade here than we did at 67, so the foundation height is lessened, and we'll be using a combination of piers and vertical side screening on all sides. Next slide, please. We always try to design houses that are respectful of their neighbors, so the majority of the windows are located on the west elevation with minimal openings at the east. Next slide. I'll just end with the streetscape and point out that we have chosen to maintain the same foundation height and entry conditions across these 3 houses. That results in a finished floor at the second 2 that's a little higher than required, but we feel like this creates a more cohesive street presence and will have minimal effect on the overall height, which again is significantly lower than the district permits. So that's all I have for these. Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron, do we have any board questions? Okay. Any public comment, Kim?
We have none for the rest of this project.
Okay.
Can I ask my co-applicant, if Jeffrey Roberts, if he has a comment? It seems like he might be raising his.
Kim?
Yes.
Thank you. First of all, I really appreciate the board's commentary before and the vote of confidence. Julia and I have been doing projects for 16 years together and have a lot of fun doing them and have won multiple awards from Preservation and Historic Charleston Foundation. And we understand, to echo Mr. Gardner's comment, that these will truly be done as market-based houses. We have the horsepower and the economies of scale to do it. And as Glenn said, when you walk by these things, you will never know that they have deed restrictions and are in Gianna, the Department of Housing and Community Development's plan. So we appreciate all the kind words, and that's really what I wanted to say. And we appreciate the confidence that the board has that we will pull this off, and we have the experience to do so. And again, Julia and myself have been working together for 16 years doing good stuff around town. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Kim, I think we'll move to city staff comments and recommendations. So should I again assume that there's an added staff comment that they should be further differentiated from one another?
Please do. So we wholeheartedly support the project, and we would just request that they be further differentiated. So the staff's recommending conceptual approval with final review by staff. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any further comment or clarification from the applicant?
No.
Thank you. I'll open it up for board discussion and vote. And to start, I actually wanted to go back to the board comment. Would it be a better statement to say, to ask the applicant to maintain that unique detailing while avoiding the possibility it would be mistaken for historical detailing? Bill, is that more your issue with it?
Yeah, I would just say it could be, just want to make sure that it's obviously contemporary in nature and not historic. Not an effort to replicate a true historic detail.
Okay. Do we have any other board discussion on this particular design? I think it's the next 3, so.
Yeah, no, Lindsay, I think it is important to maintain a consistent motion, and I certainly appreciate your trying to, I was at a bit of a confused state of wording on the last one. So I think it is important. I know we have to vote individually, but I think it is critical to be consistent on all of these.
I agree with Glenn on the idea of consistency. I am still troubled by that board motion. I voted for it reluctantly. I think I would continue to vote for it because I think that Glenn's comment about consistency on all the designs is important. But I'm just going to express, I just want to state for the record that I'm concerned about that because I think it could possibly end up diminishing what started out as a really good design. I don't think it will, and that's why I voted for it, because I think there's a general understanding. But I do think we're opening the door here to potentially diminishing a nice design. And that's my only comment.
Fillmore, to, I guess, address that point, and to get back to the intent of kind of what I was trying to bring up is one thing that we do try to avoid as a board is sort of a falsification of history and historic details. And I was not insinuating that adding barge boards or anything of that, design direction are falsifying history. If they're stylized, we could call it a more contemporary nature. That may be subjective. I was just saying it. I believe it's more to Glenn's point about materiality and some issues like that. Just to say that it's obvious that they're modern. They may be more stylized in a way that reads that way.
I understand that, and I appreciate the idea behind it. That this is an old argument in preservation and in inserting contemporary structures into districts. It goes all the way back to the Venice Charter, and I think it is widely misinterpreted, and there is an ongoing debate in the preservation community about its interpretation. I do not disagree that it is disingenuous to pretend that a new building is an old building. But I think oftentimes the way that very simple two-line statement in the Venice Charter has come down over the last 50 or 60 years through preservation has resulted in significant misinterpretation of the original intent of that. And so I often find myself worried that we diminish good design by applying a somewhat, even though genuinely legitimate concern, sometimes a somewhat misinterpreted interpretation of that legitimate concern. And that's what I am stating here. I think that the board here and the staff understand what we're saying, and so I would support the motion as originally stated, because I think that applying consistency to all the designs is important.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate the discussion, because I think what we're doing in this discussion is clarifying more exactly what the intent of what we were trying to get at, and now we can do that by consensus. So I agree with a lot of what you're saying. To the degree I would, if perceived as intense in any way, I'd back down off of that. I really didn't be perceived as that, or as coming down on any of the design detailing. I think it's very handsome, and I think there's definitely a place for this type of thing. And I believe it's stylized in a way that it doesn't necessarily replicate history as drawn. I just wanted to make sure that it was executed that way, and that no one would just get perceived that it was maybe something historic when it wasn't. But I believe everything is fine, and more than agreement with your points, Fillmore. And I'm not digging in my heels that adamantly about this.
Right. No, I understand where you're coming from, Bill. I don't think we have a fundamental disagreement here.
So I agree with Glenn's sentiment that we need to be consistent amongst all the motions, but I would rather get it right on this one moving forward. And at this point, Kim, could you read the motion that we voted on agenda item number 6?
So it was conceptual approval with staff comments 1 and 2 and board comment to maintain unique detailing while also reflecting a contemporary design. Kind of muddy.
Lindsay, may I insert something very quickly again? I'm sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
And I guess one other point about this is potentially precedents for this board going forward, because I think these homes have been very elegantly designed, well designed, and the application of detail is done in a very good way. But there could be a point in time when maybe someone does try to over falsify something. And I think to that point of consistency, by us saying this, I think it will maybe benefit another day.
Thanks, Bill. Okay, so hearing the board comment that was voted on in the prior agenda item to maintain the unique detailing while also reflecting a contemporary design. After having the further discussion, does this, again, Fillmore, could this reflect your thinking?
I think, I mean, I will support that motion because I think we have, a pretty good understanding. And I think staff has an understanding and final reviews by staff. And I think I have confidence in their review ability. I would, if I were going to reword that, which I'm not sure we should do, to Glenn's point, I might change the word design to construction. I think that makes a more appropriate statement. Contemporary construction or modern construction as opposed to design. But to Glenn's point, I think that consistency is important here. And so I'm not saying I won't support the motion as written.
Chair, may I interject? I just wanted to make a point that it's, you mentioned construction, Fillmore, it's hardy plank, so hardy board.
Sorry, Kim, beg your pardon?
The construction method is hardy plank.
Right, but I mean the detailing, just the detailing that it reflects modern construction, so that there's no misinterpretation. But I think back to the same point. That's sort of a didactic conversation. I think we need to be consistent in these approvals. Otherwise, you end up with potentially, with different directions, different instructions from the board for different buildings, and I'm not sure that's appropriate.
I am with Glenn on this one to maintain consistency, especially since could someone mute their computer? There's a lot of background noise. I don't know if that's just me. And anyways, I agree with Glenn, consistency on this one. I wanted to make sure that the prior motion was not completely objectionable to Fillmore, but hearing that it's not, I don't have any further comments. Do we have a motion on the floor for agenda item number 7?
This is Bill. I'll make a motion for conceptual approval with staff's comment and with board comment and final review by staff.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor for conceptual approval with staff comments 1 and 2 to mirror the prior motion, and a board comment to maintain the unique detailing while also reflecting a contemporary design, and final review by staff. I will now put it to a vote. Oh, excuse me. Do we have a second to that motion?
Second.
I will now put it to a vote. Fillmore?
Yay in favor.
Bill,
Yay in favor.
Glenn,
In favor?
and the chair votes with the majority, and motion passes unanimously. Moving on to agenda item number 8, 7 Father Grants Court. Kim, do you have an introduction for this one, or?
Bear with me just a moment. I don't. Just going to keep moving.
Kim, would you mind just going back to the precedent page? Yeah, I just thought I'd highlight that there are multiple projects here that are built examples of some of these details, some historic, some where they've been used in historic, buildings, and some are new. And while I might be really flattered if somebody mistook our new construction for a historic building, I really don't think that that's going to happen. I don't think that we're in danger of doing that. We haven't tried to exactly replicate anything that we have found out in the community in terms of detail, but we are trying to thread the needle between having these all be somewhat unique and varying, and being sensitive to obviously the budget that we're working within, and how custom they can each be. So I would just throw that out there. And then otherwise, if you want to go to sheet A201, that's our front elevation. And you can see there that the X sawn balusters are what distinguishes this, along with the color from its sisters. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Erin. Do we have any board questions? Okay, I understand we do not have any public comment, so on to city staff and recommendations.
We are recommending conceptual approval with final review by staff, and the condition that they are further differentiated.
Okay. Erin, did you have any comments?
No, thank you.
I'll take it to board discussion and a vote.
Yeah, I'll just say I think the bit of dialogue we've spent time on has probably been good and was needed. And I think we are all on the same page now, or close to it. And I think at the same time, Erin and her clarification was also helpful. So I'm comfortable with where we are. So I would state the same motion Bill made on the previous one for conceptual approval with final by staff, with staff comment and board comments.
Okay.
Bill, I'll second.
Kim, do you need me to repeat the motion?
No, ma'am, I've got it. Thank you.
I've got a motion on the floor by Glenn, a second by Bill. I will put it to a vote. Fillmore?
Yay in favor.
Glenn?
Yay in favor.
Bill?
Yay in favor.
Chair votes with the majority, and the motion passes unanimously. Moving to agenda item number 9, 11 Father Grants Court, which I believe is the third in that row that we just addressed.
Yes, this is same as what you just seen. The railing detail here would have sort of a diamond motif cut out. Otherwise, that's all I have.
Okay. No board questions and no public comments. I see city staff comments and recommendations.
We recommend approval, final review by staff, and just the one comment to differentiate.
Okay. Erin, I assume no response, but please interrupt me if you have one.
Nope.
I'll open it up for board discussion and a vote.
Go ahead, Glenn.
No, well, if we want to alternate or whatever, I was just going to selfishly make the same motion as before for conceptual approval with final by staff, with staff comment and board comment.
And I will second that again.
And hearing no more discussion, I'll put it to a vote. Fillmore,
Yay in favor.
Glenn,
Yay in favor.
Bill,
Yay in favor.
the chair votes with the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Moving to agenda item number 10, 15 Father Grant Court.
Aaron, you have the floor.
All right, so 15 Father Grant's Court, it's the least visible from America Street as it's in the rear corner of the site. It's going to be the mirror image of number 19, though, which is right at the end of the court. You want to flip to the precedent images on sheet 3.
Sorry about that.
So at these two houses, the grade is high enough that we don't need railings at the porches. So we wanted to pull in some small scale detail in other ways, such as shake and scallop siding, like you see on the sister houses in the upper right-hand corner on Elizabeth Street, and with brackets at the porch columns, similar to the middle picture at the top. Next slide.
Oops.
This is the largest parcel on the court, seen here in the bottom left-hand corner. The actual street frontage is really limited, so the driveway abuts out of number 11, and then the house is set back to align with its neighbor at number 19. Next slide. This lot has a more spacious yard with a nice walkway up to the front porch, as well as a secondary entry on the south side and plenty of room to locate mechanical at the rear. Next slide. The plan here is similar to what you saw at the previous 3, but we've adjusted the porch and fenestration from a 2-bay to a 3-bay pattern. Next slide. Here are front and side elevations. As I mentioned, the higher grade lends itself to a raised slab foundation, again with a smooth stucco finish. The porch will be masonry as well, with decorative brackets at the columns. The barge board here has been simplified, and we have swapped the board and batten siding for hardy scallop at the gable end. We think that the single window works well in lieu of the gable vent we've shown elsewhere. Next slide, please. Here again, you can see the windows are concentrated on the south elevation, providing privacy to the north, and we're carrying the scallop siding to the rear as well. Next slide. And then, like as I mentioned, you don't catch a glimpse of this in either streetscape view, but it's essentially the mirror image of the house at the far end of the court, shown in the proposed view in the middle. And that is all I have.
I am muted. Any board questions on this particular design? Hearing none, and I understand we have no public comments. Kim, city staff comments and recommendations?
We support this project, conceptual approval with final review by staff, and our only comment is for further differentiation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Aaron, did you have any other comments?
Nope.
Okay, I will move on to board discussion and a vote. This is a slightly different design, so
All right, I was waiting on Glenn.
No, I'm going to be less, whatever.
All right, I'll do it. I'll make a motion for conceptual approval with final review by staff, with staff's comment and board comment noted.
motion by Bill. Do I have a second?
I'll jump at once.
I think you're up.
Fillmore might be, I was going to let Fillmore do this, but I will second this, yes.
Fillmore, Glenn beat you to it. I'll put it to a vote. Fillmore,
Yay in favor.
Bill,
Yay in favor.
Glenn,
Yay in favor.
Chair votes with the majority and the motion passes unanimously. And we are moving on to the final agenda item, 19 Father Grants Court.
Ken, if you just want to go to sheet 201. This parcel is the only one that actually falls on an X zone, but because we wanted to maintain some sort of foundation or base, we've kept the finished floor slightly elevated like the others. As you can see here in elevation, here we've simply reoriented the entry to the left side of the porch, replaced the scallop siding with shakes, and then, as I said, retain that minimal foundation so our siding isn't coming down to grade. Just want to end with the streetscape. We're really excited about these little houses. We think they provide a nice variety of detail and vernacular character that's often eliminated in projects with such a tight budget. But we have tried to be strategic and thoughtful with these designs, and we look forward to seeing this little court come to life in the near future. That's all I have.
Thank you, Erin. I assume no additional board comments, and there is no public comment, I understand. We'll move to city staff comments and recommendations.
We're in support. We recommend conceptual approval with final review by staff and just a differentiation restudy.
Erin, I assume no further comment on your part, so we will move to board discussion and a vote.
This is Bill. I'll make a motion for conceptual approval with staff's comments and board comment and final review by staff.
Thank you, Bill. Do I have a second to Bill's motion?
Second.
Glenn, okay, I will now put it to a vote. Fillmore?
Yay in favor.
Bill?
Yay in favor.
Glenn?
Yay in favor.
The chair votes with the majority and the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
That is your,
Chairman, motion to adjourn.
do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hey, aye. Oh, yes.